Hello and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be starting a new weekly series on this channel, hopefully summarizing the week's events in political news, which will hopefully come out every Monday, and the first of which I wanted to talk about the Senate race in Pennsylvania with the entrance of Dr. Oz, and of course the big breakthroughs in Georgia revolving David Perdue and Stacey Abrams. So basically, I hope to make this series somewhat weekly, every Monday, kind of summarizing the week's events, because I really don't talk about news and current events all that much in this channel, but I want to give it some sort of a platform because I can't really cover every update that happens, so I figure I'd break it down in the form of one video each week. So today we're going to talk about Dr. Oz's entrance into the Senate race. Now, this is actually really big news because a couple of days before this broke, Sean Parnell actually dropped out of the Pennsylvania Senate race over a child custody battle and a family drama that was going on his end, which really left a huge hole open for the GOP in the state of Pennsylvania, because the GOP primary in Pennsylvania really doesn't have a clear frontrunner. It might now with Dr. Oz's entrance, but a lot of these people, Carla Sands, Everett Stern, Jeff Bartos, nobody's really heard of these people. They were not polling very highly. And we just have a poll that came out just a couple of days ago that actually has Dr. Oz as the frontrunner, but all of these candidates are basically within single digits besides him. Everett Stern got a whopping 0%. The GOP does not have any big names besides Dr. Oz on their running for office at the moment. The Democrats, however, do. They have Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman. Of course, they have Connor Lamb, a current representative, and that race seems to be breaking down in Fetterman's favor every single time. We have a poll from basically early November that has Fetterman dominating the rest of the field by a whopping, just a gigantic margin. So this really will be a very competitive primary. I think Connor Lamb really needs for the other candidates to drop out to have a chance against somebody like Fetterman. Fetterman's the current lieutenant governor. He has huge name recognition, but Connor Lamb, who is a current rep, definitely wants to run as the more, establishment Democratic pick as opposed to the very left-wing Democratic pick. But again, on the Republican side, the endorsements have kind of been all over the place. Sean Parnell is out, as I mentioned earlier. He had decent endorsements. He had Trump's endorsement, Josh Hawley's endorsement, Dan Crenshaw. He had a decent amount of endorsements. There's no current Pennsylvania reps trying to run for office, at least on the Senate level. And that's why I think it's a pretty weak field as of right now. Dr. Oz definitely probably the strongest candidate just because he has such huge name recognition all across the country. But, there's not... The Republicans don't have a congressman like Scott Perry or even a Mike Fitzpatrick, somebody that has huge name recognition, obviously is popular within their district, but can also reach out and win over other parts of the state as well. So really, in my opinion, the Pennsylvania Republican Senate field is lacking. I think the GOP in Pennsylvania really dropped the ball by not recruiting more electable candidates. Now, with Dr. Oz in, he's probably favored to win the primary as of right now just because he has such high name recognition. But his electability and all that really remains to be seen. We have no general election polls yet with Dr. Oz on the ballot, but I am curious to see how he would actually do in a matchup against Fetterman or Connor Lamb. But these other candidates, I can guarantee you, aren't really going to go anywhere. And the general election polls we do have, again, they're democratically skewed. They're months old. But, Fetterman beats Jeff Bartos by double digits. Nobody knows who this guy is. Connor Lamb and Jeff Bartos are kind of at the same level, I guess, just because they both have lower name ID or something. And, of course, Parnell was tied with Fetterman in one, lost to Fetterman by 8 against. These are all Democratic polls, so really take them with a grain of salt. But Sean Parnell did actually beat Connor Lamb by 2 points. But, again, the margin is 5%. The margin of error, that is. So we really don't have good polling out of Pennsylvania as to what the general election is going to be, but we can only guess based on the national mood. So again, I really think the Republicans dropped the ball here. They could have run a stronger Senate candidate. Obviously, Sean Parnell was probably the strongest, and if we have the polls, we should have some of the hypothetical polls from early on. Sean Parnell was dominating the field. He was going to be the GOP nominee. We don't have that anymore. Obviously, Sean Parnell had a lot of baggage as well that some Republicans were very worried about, but he definitely was the strongest candidate in terms of energizing the base, getting Trump's endorsement. Now, basically, whoever gets Trump's endorsement in Pennsylvania is probably going to be the nominee. If Dr. Oz gets it, which is very probable, he will certainly be the nominee in Pennsylvania for the Republican Party. So, again, Pennsylvania is really important because on the, Senate level, there's a lot. It's one of those key states. It's one of the most important states on the Senate level. And back in 2020, Pennsylvania went to Joe Biden by 1.2%. This is a state that's likely to go Republican, I think, next year based on how things are going in terms of Biden's approval. Even despite the weaker candidates, it could be a closer race. But I think just based on the national environment, you have a state that Joe Biden only won by 1.2%. I don't really see this state staying blue in 2022. But even having a candidate with high name ID like John Fetterman, I don't really see it going blue, at least in this cycle, just because of the national environment, which I don't think is going to change all that much up until the midterm. I think Biden's still going to be underwater probably until the midterm. I mean, he's been underwater since August and it's December, and we have about less than a year to go. So I don't really think that trajectory is going to change all that much. Now, in terms of the state of Georgia, we have other big news. Because, Stacey Abrams announced that she was going to run against Brian Kemp again. But we also found out that David Perdue, the former senator from the state of Georgia, is also running. So he wants to run to challenge Brian Kemp as well. So the polling thus far has had Brian Kemp in the lead. He basically had secured the primary. Vernon Jones didn't have a whole lot of support. Trump didn't endorse him, so that probably helped out Brian Kemp. But Trump has this vendetta against Brian Kemp to the point where I think probably the most electable Republican from Georgia at the moment could lose a primary and ultimately possibly lose this seat, because Georgia is one of those states that I think, even despite the national environment, is trending so far to the left, especially in the Atlanta area, that this is a state that could still go blue in 2022, for sure. I think both on the Senate level and the gubernatorial level, it's possible that the Democrats actually prevail. So if you're a Republican, this is a really crucial state to decide which Republican is most likely to carry you to victory. Now, a lot of the base is angry at Brian Kemp for, all the election debacle that happened last year. But besides that, Brian Kemp has had a pretty solid record, conservative record in the state of Georgia that most Republicans would overwhelmingly approve of. It's just that one little snag, which is his soured relationship with Donald Trump, which, Brian Kemp hasn't really said anything that, bad about Donald Trump. Donald Trump just bashes Brian Kemp and he kind of takes it. But I think that alone really puts him in hot water in Georgia. And Donald Trump has gone as far as saying that he'd rather see Stacey Abrams win in Georgia than Brian Kemp, which I think is, a pretty profound statement showing how much he really dislikes Brian Kemp on a personal level for all the stuff that happened last year. Now, David Perdue entering the race does change the dynamic, because David Perdue, though he lost the Senate race in 2021, he quote-unquote won the Senate race back in November of 2020. Donald Trump lost the state by 0.2%. At the same time, David Perdue won the state of Georgia by 1.8%. So while Donald Trump lost the state, David Perdue overperformed him by a significant amount. In terms of raw votes, he did get about 1,000 votes more than Donald Trump. But it really was Ossoff's, I think, lack of performance as well. Ossoff was not really a strong candidate. He really just got carried on the ticket by Raphael Warnock, who is a stronger Democrat on the ticket, very charismatic. Jon Ossoff is not very charismatic at all. Obviously he had some name recognition, but he wasn't really a vigorous campaigner. It just was the national environment that I think really carried him over the top. Not that Perdue was this, campaign bulwark either. But it just so happened that he had, high name recognition. He actually was a popular senator. If you look at his approval ratings up until this race, he was popular. I believe he was above water before this race occurred. So the fact that he lost really was just a reflection of the national environment. And I think less so a reflection of how Georgians actually viewed David Perdue as a person. So, this governor's race is going to be, obviously, it goes without saying, extremely important because it's going to set policy in the state of Georgia for the next 4 years. And if Republicans are able to keep the state house and state senate, which I think is very likely to happen, even if Abrams wins, probably they're likely to hold on to their majorities. It'll be interesting to see that kind of dynamic. But of course, Republicans need to hold on to the state of Georgia. It's a state that they've been losing ground in. Of course, in 2020, it was a state that Trump won by about 5.2%, down to a state that he lost by 0.2%. So nearly 5 million votes cast, 2.4. So the state really is 50-50 still. And even though we had Ossoff and Warnock win in 2021, those margins were, under 2 points. They were tilt margins in both cases for the Democrats. So this isn't like a safe blue state yet or anything. Republicans, I think, can still salvage some electoral success in the state of Georgia. But I think that's going to be short-lived. They have to do it now rather than later, because certainly once a Republican stronghold goes blue, it doesn't really go back. We saw that with Virginia, basically throughout the 2010s, to the point where Joe Biden won the state of Virginia by 10 points, 10.1%, last November. And Youngkin's win really was just really a product of a great campaign, a great candidate, and the national environment heavily favoring him, and missteps by his opponent. So it really was the perfect storm for Republicans to take back the state of Virginia, I think somewhat temporarily, because Virginia's politics so heavily hinges on the national environment. So it would probably be possible for a Republican to win in Virginia again. If we have a Republican almost winning the state of New Jersey this year, again, Jack Ciattarelli only lost by 2 points. This is a state that Biden won by 16. I think Virginia will remain competitive in the off-year elections for years to come based on that, even with the huge demographic shifts that are happening in the state. Because in New Jersey's further along on that path of demographic change, and it's still somewhat competitive on the state level because of the off year dynamic. And I think Virginia probably will stay that way as well. But I don't want to get too far off track about that because with the state of Georgia, this really is a gauge for how Georgia will match up in 2024. The Republicans' margin in the state, I think, is going to be really crucial. And, I could kind of talk about the state of Pennsylvania as well on the gubernatorial level, because I don't think Republicans have a strong candidate there either. If we go to the Pennsylvania gubernatorial candidates, we'll just put it in here. We don't really have a strong Republican field. We have Lou Barletta, who was, a failed Senate candidate in the 2018 election, lost by 13 points. And a bunch of other. We have a state Senate pro tem, who maybe could possibly shake up things. But I think overall the Republican GOP in the PA GOP has really dropped the ball in both of these statewide races, because we don't really have a clear front runner. We don't have a strong candidate, at least Republicans don't, in this state. And I think that's something that really is going to hurt Republicans, even with a favorable environment for them next year. Because, again, Pennsylvania is super winnable for Republicans. They just need to improve in the collar counties in an off year, and they need to improve in northeastern PA and western PA. And they can definitely do all those things in a, Republican wave environment, if that's what next year turns out to be. So I think definitely Pennsylvania is certainly tilting in the Republicans' favor, I'd say, as of the moment. Again, with the updates we've seen with Dr. Oz, that is a big name. The question is how he's perceived by a general electorate. That really remains to be seen. But everything else is really up in the air for the Pennsylvania Republicans, because it's just such a, you know, it's going to be such a difficult race to gauge for a while, given that we don't have any really strong candidates yet on the GOP side. So Democrats probably will look favored for a few months until we see more polling on that. But anyway, guys, thank you all for watching this video. Hope you enjoyed this sort of update video. I hope to continue this series in weeks to come, just talking about what's been going on in politics the prior week and basically the week leading up to the video. Please leave a thumbs up if you enjoyed, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell notification so you don't miss any more videos I put out. And as always, thank you all for watching again, and I hope to see you in the next one.